Hey, what's up guys? This is DJ with Art of Visuals. So we've been out here at Sony Kando trip all week. We've been playing with lots of gear, learning stuff, having tons of fun. So we are here today with Chris Burkard. He's gonna teach us a couple of things about aerial photography. So Chris, take it away.
I think what comes to my mind when I consider what I love about aerial photography, it's the ability to show often the mundane and just make it come alive. You know, seeing your own hometown from a new perspective, people appreciate it, right? And they learn to love it. I also love the idea of being able to not just launch a drone and put your head down in a controller, but stick your hand out the window. You feel the air, you feel the wind, it's cold. You suffer for these images, right? And you're able to really appreciate the process of making them.
What are the essential pieces of gear that you feel like someone would need on a shoot?
All right, for me, when I'm in the air, the three essential pieces of gear, besides a good camera strap, because we never get in the air without one of those, is probably a wide angle lens. 16 to 35 is my lens of choice. Now, I love the idea of feeling kind of close and intimate, and shooting this big, broad perspective that, only, being in the air gives us. Secondly would be a polarizer. I cannot stress enough a good polarizer. Cutting that reflection out of the water, that's what gives you that deeply saturated look that you see when you're shooting into these glacial rivers or really any body of water. The third thing would probably be some sort of stabilization. Now, the internal stabilization inside of a lot of the cameras, for me, the A7R4, the A7 III, these cameras have, I think, 3 to 4 little stabilizers on the sensor. That makes all the difference when you're dealing with heavy wind and you're putting the camera outside of an aircraft or a helicopter. So getting your foot in the door, right? Probably one of the #1 questions I ask, where do you start? Where do you begin? To be honest, for me, my interest in aerial photography was really all about wanting to fly. I wanted to be a pilot in some capacity. I wanted to at least learn. And what ended up happening was my wife booked me a flight for a birthday of mine. I was in a small plane, flew over my hometown, and I was like, this is amazing. This is everything. And what I realized over time was that it's actually really easy to find these connections, to find people who are willing to fly. What I usually start with is I research a flight school. There's oftentimes tons of small municipal airports around. I call them up and I say, is there a flight school willing to do a lesson? A lot of my flights, I've gone up trying to get my own hours. Well, first of all, it's safer, to understand in some way how a plane works. It helps you become a better photographer in the air. And secondly, it's usually cheaper than just going out and doing an aerial tour, right? So I try to go up, I try to learn a little bit. I let the pilot fly for a couple seconds while I take some photos, and so on and so forth. So I'm kind of knocking out 2 birds with 1 stone. Secondly would be just researching, aerial tour, flight tour. For me, I usually fly in a small plane like this, light aircraft, right? Cessna 172. It's cheap, doesn't burn a lot of fuel. Really, it's kind of like a Volkswagen bus of the air, to be honest. They fly pretty slow. Helicopters are going to cost a lot more money. They're incredible to shoot out of, but they're often slower, so you can't access as much terrain. So one thing I would say is that do your research. Know your pilot. If you can try to meet them and try to see if they have an understanding of the area, plan a route out. That's one of the things that's really helpful. Plan out a route, look on Google Earth. These are really places that I try to dig in deep, because oftentimes I'm going somewhere that I've never flown before and I'm trying to make the most of that money that I'm about to spend. And the one thing I'll say is that I've never had a bad experience in the air unless I've forgotten to go to the bathroom before I get up there. So enjoy it, learn, take risks. This is what it's all about. So one of the things I want to address, which I think is really important, is you aren't always going to be in Yosemite Valley or Patagonia or Iceland or somewhere amazing to shoot aerial photographs. Sometimes you're like, I'm in the middle of the Midwest. What's interesting here? I don't know what it's going to look like. To be totally honest, there's always an interesting subject. And what you find by getting in the air is that the way the light plays across the trees or a farmer's field or even a tractor, sitting in it can be really incredible. What this comes with is just experience, allowing yourself to go up and start to look for these things. And one of the most incredible things about really modern day drone photography is that it's shown to us how interesting the everyday can be. What I find is that, sometimes the most simple thing, like, something cutting crops halfway across a field and you're shooting looking straight down, can be an incredible subject. It's not always about the big mountains, the obvious stuff. I feel like the most interesting photos you're ever gonna create are really gonna be the ones that I think people would often overlook. So don't be afraid to go out there and just experiment, right? Don't wait for the perfect opportunity. For me, so much of aerial photography is simply changing people's perspectives by showing them everyday life in a way they haven't normally seen it. I would actually say that probably the more interesting photographs are the places that haven't really been photographed very often, and when we find they're able to kind of flip the perspective up on top of people's heads.
Okay, so I took a class with Chris this week, and I feel like I took away so many bits of information. This has honestly been so helpful.
Thanks,
we
man.
appreciate you, man.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for
Always
your
a
help.
pleasure to have you guys. Appreciate it.
You ready to go fly?
I am, yeah.